I want to spend some time this time and a little time next time talking about not just who the Holy Spirit is, because the Holy Spirit's the third person of the Trinity, and we've already covered that, but our relationship, or really our relationships with the Holy Spirit. How the Spirit acts in creation in ways that reveal who God is. The Spirit is a kind of secondary character to Jesus in the New Testament for a really neat reason. Israel knew of the Spirit of God from the prophets, from the Torah. I'll show you passages in the Bible, in the Old Testament, that speak to the Spirit of Yahweh. And so, Israel was ready to understand the Spirit. The shocker was the Son. And so, the Son's arrival and the Son's character and work, that got more New Testament attention, and it got more subsequent attention. But that the Spirit of Yahweh was alive and active and at work, that's not something that would have shocked first-century Jews. Nevertheless, the church understood something to have changed in its understanding of the Holy Spirit in light of Jesus. With Jesus' coming, the Spirit comes as well in a new way. I'll give you just one picture of that. In Galatians 3, when Paul is trying to teach this church to understand the good news, because it's garbled the good news and mistaken it for something else. After a couple of chapters of really wonderful argumentation, he says, let me just ask you only this, like set all that aside. In chapter 3 he says, when did you receive the Holy Spirit? Was it keeping the Torah, or was it when you heard the word and believed it with faith? The miracles that happen in your church, did those come with Torah observance, or did those come when you heard in faith? So what's the right association? The right association is that the faith of Jesus Christ has brought the Spirit. And I think it kind of blows me away that he could use that as a persuasive argument with his church. Is your church so familiar with the Holy Spirit's life and power that argument would work there? Like those miracles, when did they start happening? I mean, he expects them to be good empiricists and to think, oh yeah, the signs and wonders, they all started when we believed in Jesus Christ, not when we started hearing about how you needed to be circumcised. The Spirit made a difference in Galatia. The Spirit made a difference in the New Testament church, a profound difference. Such a difference that Jesus' life, death, resurrection is one focal point of the church's attention, but Pentecost, its receiving the Holy Spirit, becomes another focal point of the church's attention and self-understanding. The Spirit made a difference again in the 4th century when the Nicene Creed was being hammered out. The central controversial figure was the incarnate Word. And the Spirit just creeps in 325. I also believe in the Holy Spirit, the Creed says. Between 325 and 381, so the middle of the 4th century, saw controversies over whether the Holy Spirit was a person and whether the Holy Spirit was truly divine. It's like the church had to catch up to its original Jewish understanding to affirm the full divinity of the Spirit, and it did in 381 in Constantinople. So the revised Nicene Creed of 381 fleshes out who the Spirit is. No pun intended. The church meditates on the significance of the Holy Spirit and ends up with a much thicker account of the Holy Spirit in the Nicene Creed than you got in the earlier version or in the Apostles' Creed that you're memorizing. Christianity became a global faith in a new way in the 20th century as vast areas of the world came to know the gospel. And one of the most influential strains of Christianity in those places is charismatic and Pentecostal Christianity. There are over 600 million Pentecostals in the world, with a very pronounced doctrine of the person and the work of the Holy Spirit. So pneumatology means study of the Holy Spirit, is making an immense difference in world Christianity. I could add autobiographically that learning that the Holy Spirit is real and is personal and is the Lord and works has made a substantive difference in my own life and my own faith repeatedly. In at least 2 episodes, had we had time to explain, I could unpack that. But you probably know someone else whose life is rather like that if you ask. You might not know that their life is like that, but if you found out, you'd see the same thing. When we encounter the presence and power of the Holy Spirit, the theoretical gets real. And suddenly our plausibility structures have to accommodate a rather surprising God. And we kind of end up feeling like the first century church that knew about the Spirit of Yahweh, but now knows the Spirit of Yahweh. I'm going to give you 5 aspects of the Spirit's work and the Spirit's character. There aren't just 5, but I've come up with 5. So you could build on these with further ones. And they all come down to prepositions. These are all ways that I see the Spirit relating to us. Now, don't take that in a modalistic way, that it's only with respect to us that God is Spirit. That's not the case, right? God is eternally Father and Son and Holy Spirit. And Father and Son and Holy Spirit have to do with their relations with one another, which are eternal relations. Nevertheless, when God acts in the creation, the Spirit relates to that creation in a variety of ways. Then you can retroject back, so who is this God that we're seeing displayed in these historical temporal relationships? And that's how Christian theology works. You look at how God has revealed himself to find out who God is. So I'm going to show you 5 of them. I want to show you how those relationships that we have with the Spirit cross both testaments. You'll find them both in Israel and you'll find them in the church. I want you to see something that will become more and more prominent in the course, which is that things that we do as the church practices, embody these relationships. Things we do in the church respect the Spirit before us, the Spirit over us, the Spirit upon us, in us, through us. Because there are 5 of these relationships, there's a complexity in our relationships with the Spirit that people can miss. We can have favorites. We can have more direct experiences of the Spirit in one mode than in another mode. And as a result, our traditions often ending up privileging one relationship or several relationships over others. So you have Pentecostals that are comfortable with one or a couple, but not so comfortable with others. And vice versa. You have mainliners that are comfortable with some, but not as comfortable with others. And when that happens, the way the Spirit is understood in that tradition gets thinner, narrower, and weaker. In a way, it's a kind of theological reductionism that reduces our relationships with the Spirit to a subset. And then we get a narrower appreciation of the Spirit's character and work. And often the result of that is also that we're polarized against the traditions who have other favorite relationships. And we become more and more suspicious of one another. And so narrower theologies can beget polarized and estranged traditions. Finally, I don't have time to unpack these, but I'm just going to put them here so that if you want to follow this up in a theology and life log or in other classes that you're taking, I'd like you to see that each of these 5 relationships that we have with the Holy Spirit offers resources for intellectual problems and cultural dilemmas that we face, not in the church so much as in our wider culture. in America, and actually in the disciplines of academia. So that's where we're going to go.